His work spans across commercial and portrait photography, but what really stands out is how much of it is rooted in presence and in observing, letting go of expectations, and responding to what unfolds in the moment. Welcome to Fully Managed, Zave.
Hello.
So let's start with, like, before you even press the shutter, what are you paying attention to that most people wouldn't think matters?
Well, I don't know what other people find matters or not, so I can only talk about myself. I think that a couple of years ago, I was explaining to someone what I do. And I said, my job is to notice things. And I think we walk through life and we walk through our daily routines, and our eyes are constantly scanning. We're constantly noticing things. And what a photographer does, or any artist does, is take the things that they notice and really notice them. Stop for a second, take it in, think about what it means, what its importance is. Ask yourself, why are you noticing this? What about this scene, or this, if you're a musician, this combination of sounds? What about that made your brain go, huh? And take those things and convert it into, in my case, a physical object, which is a photograph. In a musician's case, it might be a song, right? So we notice things, we keep our heart open, we keep our brains open, our eyes open. We notice things, and when something strikes our curiosity, we go, what can I do with that?
Oh, that's such a good answer. That's such a good answer. And I mean, you're so right. I think that's such a cool way of seeing, like, life in general, you know, because
you have to be present, you know, you have to be Zen, which for a guy who's highly caffeinated and a little bit on the hyperactive scale, not an easy trick.
Yeah, the power of presence is the power of the now, of the moment, you know. I feel like we live our lives in such a rush that we really don't slow down. And it's like, why is this thing that has caused me, like, such a beautiful feelings, is causing me these beautiful feelings, you know? Like, why is that lake causing me so much, like, peace and I don't know, like, depth?
You have to ask yourself why. Why is this thing affecting me? Emotionally or visually or audio, you know, whatever. And then you have to take that and go, what can I do with it? You know, can I do something with it? Is there a way of converting that feeling, that glimpse, that glitter, that whatever, into, in my case, into a photograph? And 99% of the time, the answer is no. It doesn't. You know, I always find it really interesting, things that, back when I was shooting still life photography, for example, there was this material, I can't remember what it's called, that kind of like was iridescent. And I had some of it hanging in my studio. And clients would always go, oh, we should photograph in that. And I finally got rid of it because while it was really kind of cool to look at, it photographed terribly. It was, you put it on a set with an object, and, you know, it was a double, no, this is not working. So there are things that work for your eye or work in life that don't necessarily translate into photography or into music, for example. You know, could be a combination of sounds or a combination of words if you're writing a poem or you're an author. But yeah, you walk through life, you notice things, and you say, can I make this into a photograph?
Oh, that's such a great answer. I love it. That's the best answer I have ever received, truly. And, like, what are you intentionally ignoring when you're shooting, you know?
I don't know if I'm intentionally ignoring anything because you never know. I think what I am, in fact, I'll change my answer. What I'm intentionally ignoring is my prejudices. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. I remember years ago, I was photographing a bunch of 20-somethings on the beach playing volleyball. And there was this one moment where I noticed this one woman, like from here to here, she was wearing a bikini with like some blue and I think they were kind of reddish or magenta stripes, and the bikini, just the form with the bikini against the sky and the sand with the beach ball was really cool. And for half a moment, I said to myself, no, you can't photograph that. It's just too dirty old man kind of thing, right? And I said, no, let go of that. Let go. Follow your eye. Follow your eye. And I did. And it was a great photograph. And that's happened many times. There's the shot I did in Miami of an old guy. He was like in his 80s and with the 80-year-old pot belly, you know, and he was wearing a Speedo. A little teeny Speedo. And I photographed him side view with the ocean in the background and the waves. And you saw everything, right? and I remember thinking when I did it, like, this is kind of like, you know, I don't know, obscene is not the right word, you know, invasive or exploitive, whatever, but I made a great photo. So what you have to do oftentimes is ignore the things that say, well, your eye says go, but your brain censors yourself. And especially nowadays, especially in the U.S., we all trying to be politically correct. We censor ourselves a lot. But I think a lot of it is turn the censors off and follow your eye.
That's a great answer also. And like you've also, you mentioned that that you intentionally ignore prejudice, which I think is a great way to go when you're taking, you know,
instead of prejudice, I would say, I would probably say self-censorship.
Self-censorship. Okay.
Yeah.
And you've also said that your best moments happen when you let go of expectations on set. So what's something you had to unlearn as a photographer to be able to see what's actually in front of you?
I think, I think you have to answer this from two different points of view. One is if I'm doing a commercial assignment where I'm executing someone else's vision, or not so much vision, but intention, or my own intention, right? When I'm photographing for someone else, there's oftentimes you go, I know what they want, so you execute it, and when you get there, you stop, because there's usually time constraints and budget constraints and whatnot. So often that's a mistake. So often, I can remember I'll tell you a story, because stories answer things better. I was shooting an ad for AARP, and the layout was this couple in a canoe on the lake, the sun hitting their faces, the setting sun hitting their faces, so their faces lit up really clearly. The background would fade into the evening light, you know. So we got to it, we got cast two people. Of course, we forgot to ask them if they knew how to canoe, but that's another story. We had them on this lake. The art director was there, very specifically said she wanted that part of the lake as a background. So I had to be over here, the background's there. We angled the canoe so the light's hitting their faces. The shot was perfect, exactly what they wanted, right? We did it, we got done, and the person who was hiding behind the canoe and holding it in place, because these two did not know how to canoe at all, let go, and the boat started to drift towards the shore. As it's drifting towards the shore, it drifted in front of the setting sun. So the couple in the boat were silhouetted, so you couldn't see their faces. Now remember, the creative brief was very specific. We want to see their faces. We want to see that happiness, you know? They're in silhouette. This is back when we were shooting transparency. There was no way to recover that shadow. It was going to be a silhouette shot. It was behind them was a part of the lake that the art director had specifically said she did not want because there's some buildings back there that she didn't want in the background. But it looked kind of cool, and I kept photographing because it looked kind of cool. And lo and behold, that's the shot they used because it looked really cool, right? So that is another time when you have to like let go of the brain, let go of the budget, let go of your preconceived notions, and again, listen to your eye, follow your eye.
And do you think that that's something you learn with time? Because I can imagine that it takes like courage and sort of
Yes, and I
mental
still struggle
strength.
at times. You still
Yeah.
struggle at times because, again, especially in commercial work, you have a budget, you got time constraints. Um, it's sometimes it's almost impossible. Sometimes I was doing this shoot for Procter and Gamble a few years ago, and we had an insane shooting schedule. It just was crazy. The number of shots they wanted done, and the whole shoot. My producer, I had a producer on the shoot, was sitting there staring at me, going like this, looking at her watch. Because there's no way. And we had 15 minutes. Every scene had 15 minutes, right?
Oh my God.
And that's a point where you have to ask yourself professionally, because you're being hired to do this for someone.
Yeah.
How much do I follow my eye and my instinct, and how much do I just execute the shoot, the creative brief? There's no right answer there. And there's some people who ignore the creative brief or ignore the time, and they end up on set for 18 hours, and everyone's exhausted and mad at them.
Yeah.
Or me, I'm a kind of a budget and time freak just by nature, So I kept moving on. There were a few times where I stopped and said, "Oh, look at that. That's really cool. That's worth spending extra time on," So you're constantly, if you're shooting for someone else, you're constantly making that decision. How far to push this scene? How much time do I have? If we're here late, how much extra it's going to cost because you got models, you go late, or your crew, you go late. So that's something you're constantly on a commercial job balancing. When you're shooting for yourself, this depends how tired you are.
So it's like you have talked about reacting instead of forcing an image. I'm curious what helps you stay responsive instead of slipping back into control, in those moments.
It's just habit and training and experience. Trusting. I think you have to trust yourself. I think you have to say, when you're on set, when you see something that's interesting, and it might necessarily be in the creative brief or what you set out to do, you sort of like learn to trust yourself. If this is interesting, let's see where it goes.
Yeah.
I did this whole photo series called Shadow Dancing many years ago. And it was basically photographing the shadows of dancers, but not dancers, of models. And it started, I had this piece of gray seamless up, and I was photographing some model in front of it. I was doing some headshots or something. And there was a window behind the seamless. She walked behind the seamless, I think, to change her blouse or something. I can't really remember what she did, but I think it was probably to change clothes. So she stepped behind the seamless for a second, and I saw her shadow on the seamless. And I went, ooh, that's kind of cool. And I ended up doing this whole series of people behind the background. I put lights back there. I ended up doing it all on, there was this woman, her name, she's passed, unfortunately, Linda Carr, who had these muslin, like lightweight muslin that she tie-dyed. And they were huge. They were like 12 foot wide and 20 foot long, and they were gorgeous. And I got a bunch of those from her. And I just photographed, I had my models stand behind them. I lit it so there was like 2 or 3 lights behind, so you had all these different contrasting shadows. And depending on how close the model was to the background, gave you the definition of the shadow. Sometimes you got actually a really tight shadow where you really felt like almost like a portrait, you could see the person. And sometimes it was very abstract shadow, and sometimes it was a bit of both, depending, and sometimes it was 2 people. And yeah, it was just like I saw something and I went, oh, that's cool. And I ran with it for a while, In fact, I would say most of the good work that I've ever done was, and then you go, let's run with this for a while. There was an author, God, what's her name? She wrote the book Eat, Pray, Love.
Oh, okay. I'm familiar with that.
Yeah, and she wrote a book about writing called Magical Thinking or something magic. I can't remember the name of it. I just read it this year. I could look it up if we had a moment. And she had this wonderful analogy I thought was really funny. She said she pictures ideas. There's a gazillion ideas floating out there in the ether. And every once in a while, one lands on you, right? Lands and hits your heart or hits your head. And it's up to you at that moment to go, I'm going to accept this idea and act on it, or I'm going to ignore this idea. Because these ideas want to be born. They're like little sperm. They're running around and they want to be born. And it says, oh, I'm going to go to Zave. He can do this. And then it's up to me to say, I'm going to do this or not do this. And most of the time, because we're busy, there's a coffee shop, there's a stoplight, there's a kid crying in the back, we ignore those ideas. And once in the blue moon, if you have an open heart and if you're brave, you follow that idea that hits you in the head. And you go, oh, that's worth pursuing. And that's how progress is made.
Magic.
Worth reading.
Oh my God, absolutely. Like I was just for a minute just reflecting on just so many ideas that I felt very close to my heart, and because I was scared or life happened that I chose to not grab onto it, but I'm going to rethink it now after hearing that story.
Yeah, I mean, it's a judgment. I'm much more aware of this since I read her book, which is only a few months ago. When an idea comes to me, I actually will take a moment and think, is that a good idea? Is that a bad idea? If it's a good idea, is this something I'm interested in doing? And then if it's something I'm interested in doing, do I have the resources to do it? Because sometimes you just don't. You don't have the time. You don't have the finances. You don't have the skill set, I might have a great idea for an opera, but no. This boy can't sing, right? This boy can't write music. So it might be a great idea for an opera, but it's nowhere near my skill set, right? But yeah, you said the ideas come, and then your job is to curate which ones to pursue.
That's beautiful. And like, what makes a photograph feel alive to you versus just technically good? Is it a feeling?
That's a really good question. What makes a photograph alive to me? For me, a photograph, I have this analogy I use, and I don't know how relevant or accurate it is, but I always think of any great piece of art, a photograph, a painting, a sculpture, a song, lives on three things. Number one, it has a narrative element. It implies or tells me a story, because we humans, we love stories, right? We love stories. Yeah. If it wasn't for our love of stories, you wouldn't be a podcaster. Yeah. Number two, if it's a visual art, it should do something to your eyes, to your retina. It should explode in the back of your head going, wow, look at that, look at that. I've never seen something like that before. I've never seen something that way before. It gives an intense visual pleasure or experience or curiosity. And three, will have an emotional element that's how the best stuff actually makes you feel more human. It connects into your sense of humanity. It could be not necessarily happy, Picasso, Guernica does not make you laugh and smile, but it connects you emotionally to something. So that piece of art will affect you visually, will affect you in terms of a story, possibly, and will do something for your soul.
That's such a beautiful way of seeing it again. I think you have a really unique and beautiful perspective towards life. That was a great answer. Another great answer. And you've described yourself as someone who's strong at story discovery. So what does discovering a story look like through a single photograph?
I don't know. I mean, a photograph's sort of like a haiku in some ways. It's a very short moment and very quick experience, but a good one will imply a lot. I think some of the best artwork, photography, filmmaking, poetry, whatever it might be, song, often has a formula where it will take a ambiguous moment, a very everyday moment, right? If it's someone picking up a pencil off the floor or opening a door or walking down the street, and it shows that moment in a way that resonates in a very universal way. So it takes this little particular detail, and you see or you experience both the detail and this kind of universal big gestalt emotion from it. So, a lot of really good art works that way. If you look at Edward Hopper, for example, You look at a picture of a gas station on a highway that he painted, and it's just a gas station. It's just a gas station on a highway. We've all seen hundreds, thousands maybe, gas stations on a highway. Yet the way he portrayed that gas station on the highway gave you such a sense of longing, such a sense of isolation, such a strong emotional, complex emotional moment that it became a gas station on a highway, but it also became a metaphor for the human experience. So, that's what a good piece of art or a good photograph will do. It will be a metaphor for what it means to be human.
Like making something ordinary, like feel extraordinary in a way,
was it Michel Duchamp who took a urinal and stuck it on an art museum wall and said, "This is art." And called it found art. Someone did it maybe it's 3 years ago with the banana and the piece of duct tape on a wall, and that's taking that idea to a very boring extreme, right? And when I saw that, I thought, oh, that's what gives art a bad name. But yeah, you take an ordinary thing and you make it into a metaphor for what it means to be human.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love it. And when you are photographing someone, I can imagine you end up having, these really interesting conversations about, how they think and create. So I'm curious, what do you feel like you learn about a person through that? That you wouldn't get just hearing their story.
I think that it's one of my favorite parts of being a photographer or a portrait photographer. It really is the conversations I have with my subjects. In fact, it's such a fun part or an interesting part is that I have now expanded that, and most of my portrait sessions, I actually film an interview with it. So the portrait sessions become not only a still photo portrait, they become short films about the person. And I've actually kind of narrowed this down mainly to photographing creative people, photographing artists and dancers and musicians and a preacher, because I just loved her passion. And yes, that is really what makes, for me at this stage, one of the most fun parts about photography is, again, it's an excuse. My camera is an excuse to follow my curiosities. I'm someone who's very curious about people. I really want to know what makes them tick. I really want to connect with them. I really want to hear their story. I want to know why, Isabel, you're a podcaster, how you fell into this, this young woman from El Salvador, if I remember correctly. How you became, part of this Penji project and became a podcaster. How did that happen, right? What part of your personality led you here? So to me, that's fascinating, right? So what I've done with my portraiture is not only would I look at you like right now when you have your hand on your chin and you got this, your eyes are going in about a 30 degree angle down to the left, and you got this smile. Visually, that's pretty interesting. It's stunning. You're cute, right? You're young and you have this wonderful youthful energy. So I would be, as a still photographer, I would be capturing that, right? I would have that joy that you are expressing right now. Make a great portrait. But lately, for me, that's not enough. Lately, for me, I've wanted, and it took a couple of years to get here, but I wanted not only to have that still portrait of the joy of youth, right? How great it is to be a young woman in this day and age and have all those possibilities in front of you, but also to expand that by creating a film about that, so I can hear the story and preserve that story, preserve that conversation that we might be having.
That's so cool. I can't imagine all the feelings you must have captured, because you're interviewing someone and asking them, what makes them tick, what, all these very human questions, and you're capturing as they answer, or how does that go?
What I usually do, the structure, to make this work, I had to give it a structure. So for me, and it's taken me a while. I've been at this for just over a year, close to a year and a half now. I've done, I say, 8 live and 2 in editing stage. So I've done 10 of these. And it has evolved the structure. But the way I'm currently doing it is I come in and we do the still photography shoot first, because that's actually, for me, is the hardest part. So I do this, and that also gives a chance for the person to get comfortable with me. Then we sit down for an interview. And I walk in just like you did today with a list of questions. And sometimes you follow the questions exactly, and sometimes you let it riff, right? And the questions I come up with are very specific to their creative process. So these films are thematically similar. Is they're about why you create, or how you create, or why you create. So I always like with these series is I include a little bit of biography, because you want to make these people human and you want to have some sort of emotional connection with them. But they're really about the creative process.
That's very cool. I'm very interested in seeing this work.
It's up on YouTube. If you Google me, you might find it.
That's very cool. I'm definitely watching it. Yeah, I love that. And like, you've been doing this since the late 80s, long before everything became fast and digital and content driven. I'm curious, what has stayed unchanged about creativity despite how much the tools and platforms have evolved?
The technology has evolved, and in many ways, for me personally, it's been liberating, because I can work faster. I can capture energy and expression in a way I really couldn't when I was younger and working in large format stuff. Large format photography, black and white, view cameras, and 2 1/4s were much more about formal elements of picture making. Expression was harder. Now my photography is really all about energy and expression and authenticity, not so much about the formal elements, though I use them. But also because they become second nature after a period of time. What is different, what's the same is we still have the same creative drive. We still want to express ourselves. We're still reacting to our lives. We're still reacting to our world. We're still reacting to our time. We're still reacting to our relationships. And we have a desire for those, when we have those experiences, if it's a pure visual or emotional or mixture of, to take that and convert it into a piece of sculpture, a painting, a song, or in my case, a photograph or a short film. So the intention's the same. Tools are a little different.
Yeah.
Now, what's the difference when Shakespeare was writing on parchment with a quill versus, you sit down with your word processor, or you just dictate to your computer now what you want to say. The intention, the motivation, the curiosity behind it is the same. The technique is a little different. That's all.
And like, when everything is stripped away, the client, the brief, the expectations, what is a photograph really about for you? Is it about the feeling that it invokes?
Yeah, it's all it's about. I'm actually writing a curriculum right now on taking a group of people to Morocco at the end of May. And there are people who really don't know much about photography, except they want to be better photographers. And they're all shooting with smartphones. So I am writing this curriculum out, and almost every time, in fact, I'm taking music lessons now. And, when you take music lessons or painting lessons or photography, you tend to teach the formal things. This is an f-stop. This is a shutter speed. This is light. This is color, right? Because that's really hard to learn when you're learning it for the first time.
Yeah.
But those aren't that important. Honestly, the only reason you're learning those things is you have a desire to express yourself. You have a desire to evoke an emotional reaction in someone else. So what I'm doing while I'm writing this curriculum is trying to keep that in mind, that we're not here to learn f-stops or shutter speeds or color. You need to learn them, but that's not why we're here. We're here to learn, to share, and evoke a human experience. That's the key.
Oh my God. I love it. I think that's such a spiritual way of seeing like creativity and photography. I love it. It's so spiritual the way you see it.
Well, let's talk about a Beatles song for a second, right? I don't know Paul McCartney and I don't know John Lennon, and I'm not a music person. I what do I know? I just listen to a lot of music, right? I'm sure, or I could almost guess that when they sat down and wrote Norwegian Wood, he didn't go, oh, this is a G followed by a C, followed by a D minor, followed by an E. Wow, that's really cool. No, he heard the tones, and the tones did something to his heart, did something to his ear, did something to his brain. The G, the D, the C, that was just a way of connotating so he could remember it. That's just a way of writing it down so he could remember it if he actually wrote it down. I don't know, maybe just play it. So it's not about the G, the D, and the E. It's about the emotions that tune, that melody evoke.
Oh, that's such a beautiful way to articulate it, Zave.
Thank you.
And tell us, what is like the difference between working in video and still photography? I'm curious about that.
When I first started playing with video, I thought this would be an easy transition. It's a completely different art form. They both use cameras. They both use light. They both have strong sense of composition. But what I learned is that a photograph is basically what I call a painter's art form. It's really mainly about the visual experience. You can photograph peeling paint on a wall, and it can be beautiful. It could be evocative. It can imply a story. It can move you emotionally. Can't do that with film. Film is a writer's platform. You can have really crappy looking footage, but if you have a strong story, you got yourself a film. Conversely, you can have the most technically beautiful landscape, sweep of the camera, close up on the model, blah, blah, blah. If you ain't got a story, you got nothing. So a film is really a writer's platform. It's all about the storytelling. That's the primary thing. Where in my mind, still photography, the primary thing is the visual experience. It works nice if it also implies a story. It works really well if it also invokes an emotion. But the primary thing that a still photograph has to do is be a visual experience. I was having lunch when I was a student with a guy named Ralph Steiner, who's long passed. But he was in the first part of the first generation of fine art photographers. And Ralph Steiner said to me during that lunch, he said, a photograph has to have an ego. It has to scream from across the room, look at me, look at me, look at me. And that's what a photo has to do. It's got to be that visual thing that I go, wow, look at that, right? A film has to do that, but it's mainly about the story. You can think of lots of films that are great movies, but visually, they were okay, There's some that are great. I remember seeing the movie by the Hungarian filmmaker, I think it was called Ida, won Academy Award a few years ago, Best Foreign Film. And it was done in black and white. It was about a woman who was about to become a nun, and her mother superior sent her to go reconnect with her own village or family or something in Hungary during the 1950s. And it was beautifully shot. Oh, my God. And I remember after the movie was over, I turned to my wife and I said, I'm taking all my cameras to the pawn shop tomorrow. I'm done because I got nothing on that guy. It was so, every scene could have been a still photo, but that's a rarity in cinema.
Oh, what was the name of the movie?
I think it was called Ida, IDA.
Ida. I'm drawn to it. And can you tell me about your Creative Soul series? Like, what's the origin of it?
Well, the Creative Soul, we spoke about it briefly before, is basically, again, taking the still photos, the portrait of artists. It started really as a series I did before COVID, was portraits of artists. And during COVID, we didn't do much for obvious reasons. Mm-hmm. And I kept looking at those photographs and going, I like these. I like these. I want to do some more of these. So about a year and a half ago, I thought, okay, I'm going to restart that series. But it felt like just doing portraits of artists wasn't enough for me. It wasn't enough. And then I thought, I could combine the portrait session with the interview and create these films and in the films, I use some of the still portraits that I shoot of these people. So that's where the creative soul became, as an exploration of what motivates us to be creative, why we do what we do, how we do it. And it's really just capturing the conversation that we have during a portrait shoot into an interview and into a film. So I'm telling their story two ways. I'm telling their story through still photography, and I'm telling their story through video or an interview.
I love that name. Like, how did you come up with that name? Like, it's
I
just
don't know. It's a terrible name from a marketing point of view, because if you go on YouTube and you go Creative Soul, there's like 8 different channels called Creative Soul. So you have to go on YouTube and go Zave Smith Creative Soul, to find it. And even then you might end up with someone else's Creative Soul. I guess there's just a whole lot of Creative Souls floating out there in the ether, and you can try on whatever Creative Soul might fit you, But.
I love the name. It's so beautiful. I feel like it just captures so beautifully, like a creative soul. It speaks to me.
Well, I think that the act of creativity is a very human thing. And if you want to get biblical about it, because why not get biblical about it?
Why not?
It says that, God created the heavens and earth. And then the first day he created this, second day he created that. And then he said, how does this thing go? He created man in our image, right? And if we are created in God's image and God is a creator, that means that our basic soul, is creative, because that's what we are. That's what we started out. And that's what makes being human so interesting, is that we don't just want to eat. We don't just want to sleep. We don't just want to couple. We want to express. We want to share. And we are curious. We want to understand. And that's what the Creative Soul series is about.
I can't believe that I got paid to have this conversation with you. Like, it truly, I can't believe that my job is to have conversations with people as cool as you. Truly, I'm leaving.
And I can't believe I quoted the Bible, so.
That just makes it even more interesting. Like, why not?
Really, why not?
Thank you.
That what you just said, Isabel, is such an important thing. Why not? And so much of human progress and so much of artistic progress is someone going, why not?
Why not?
Why shouldn't we try that?
Absolutely.
I don't know if it's going to work, but why not?
Why not? Absolutely. Yeah. This was just such a cool conversation. I think you are.
I enjoyed it too.
I enjoyed it so much. Like, truly, I'm really so grateful that you got here. I feel like we got a glimpse not just into your work, but into how you see people and moments in such a unique way. So I really appreciate you taking the time to share all of this. I feel like I'm leaving this conversation with new ways of thinking and new perspectives. And I can't tell you how much I enjoy those kinds of conversations that make me think about ways differently, and just expand my mind. I truly am so grateful that I get to have these conversations. So thank you for bringing, all this beautiful energy into this conversation. I'm so excited for this to go live.
Thank you for having me today.